Hello, I'm neoliberal centrist dad, Nick Tyrone. How's it going? That was a smooth intro, wasn't it? But I'm not going to change it because I'm here and I'm doing it and we're here. So I'm here today to talk to you about what Ireland taught me about Brexit. Now, a few of you who've watched my previous videos, and thank you very much to those who did, I've done a series of videos from my trip in Ireland, just talking about stuff that occurred to me, sort of co-referencing it with the stuff I've been doing work-wise in terms of traveling around England over 2024 and 2020 so far in 2025, and how I thought that Ireland struck me as richer, and how I felt the coastal towns in Ireland were, they'd cracked tourism in a way that, yeah, we're nowhere near doing in England. And yeah, I traveled around. I went to Belfast. I took the ferry from Liverpool to Belfast, and then around the north coast up to Bushmills, and then down the west coast, Galway, Ring of Kerry, through Cork, Lismore. I stayed in where I did a video that a lot of you have watched. So thank you, and thank you for all your comments. And then up to Dublin, and then back to Belfast, and now I'm back in London, which is home. And I came away with a story which I feel like really illustrates more than anything else, because I could sit here and talk about trade figures, and I could talk about how Ireland seemed, richer. All those things I've covered in past videos already. But I think there's this one story that really boils down what Ireland taught me about Brexit and how it's made me think about it in a slightly different way. So here we go. A little bit of housekeeping. Some of you will notice I've shaved a bit of the beard. I've still got it, but it's trimmed down. It's not quite as hairy Grizzly Adams as it was, and cut my hair. That's for my re-entrance into London professional life. Don't know if I look younger or older with the shorter beard. But anyway, I'm sure there will be people in the comments who will have an opinion. Anyhow, what did Ireland teach me about Brexit? So here goes. So when I was in Lismore, I stayed just off the grounds of the castle, which is a big castle in Lismore, which is still occupied by someone. I don't know who. But anyway, a lot of what used to be the grounds are now private residences, and they were where the servants were headquartered, the staff, basically, of the castle. That doesn't seem to be what it is anymore, and now you can get it on Airbnb if you want, which I did. And so while I was there, we got there and we drove through the town, and then sort of out of the town onto a side road, country road, in order to get to where we were staying. And I had to go into town, and it was a very short drive, 2 minutes. But given it was a 2-minute drive and we'd been in the car kind of most of the day, what I wanted to do was have a walk and explore and figure out a way to get to the town in a creative, interesting way, essentially. I wanted an experience, is really what I was after. And I didn't want to be back in the car and then have to find a place to park in the town, although that wouldn't have been that difficult. But nonetheless, I wasn't in the mood for any of that. What I wanted was a forest walk, a commune with nature. I wanted something new and different. I wanted to change where I was in my head. So I started walking, and there was a little path. You go down out of the place we were staying, and you walk down to a river. It's a lovely river. A sort of very, if you were doing a stereotype of such things, a beautiful Irish glen, shall we say. In lovely weather. It was a sunny day. So I'm walking beside the river, and I'm thinking, well, there must be a way to get from the river to the town, and it must be somewhere in this forest. So I begin to walk through the forest, and it's really lovely. And at first, it feels like this walk through the forest, I'm having such a lovely time, it's justified my decision not to take the simple route and drive into town. I'm having the experience that I was after, and it's really lovely. But time goes on, and I'm kind of wandering in the forest for a while and starting to go, And then I'm thinking, where was the river again? And I'm trying to get back to the river, and I can't quite find the river. And what I do is I'm starting to get the path that I'm on is starting to get dodgier and dodgier, in the sense that it's less defined as a path, right? It's becoming much more just a sort of vague outline through the forest. And the forest itself actually is getting a little bit thicker. There's a lot more stinging nettles. There's a lot more thorns. I'm starting to get scraped. I'm starting to go, okay, now I'm not so sure about this as my choice, in terms of whether I could have just driven or taken or tried to find this new and innovative path through the forest to the town. And then, but I decided to keep going, right? I've made my decision. That's it. You know, this is the path I've gone down. This is what I voted for. I'm doing it. I'm going to find a way. I know I must be vaguely, direction-wise, I'm vaguely in the right sort of way of the town. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, I'm really not far from the town, so there should be a way. Unfortunately, what happens is the brambles and the thorns and the stinging nettles just continue to get worse. The path continues to get worse. What I keep hitting are big stone walls, which are not climbable, so I can't get around them. And I keep going, no, I can do this. I can do this. There's going to be a way. There's going to be a way. I've come this far, right? I'm not giving up now. And I kept doing this and kept doing this until there came a point where I really got I got really done by a patch of stinging nettles, quite terribly, both on my leg and my arm. And I went, okay, fine. And essentially I turned back and found my way back to the house, and I got in the car and I drove to the town. And I had a lovely time in the town. I got everything done that I needed. And I was annoyed that I'd had to turn back and that my plan had not gone as I had wanted. But I'd got to a point where I couldn't really... There was no point. I'd reached too many stone walls. The path was too dodgy. I was getting stung too hard. Just had to turn back and just admit that I was wrong, right? Admit that driving into town was always the right move. It was the sensible move. It was the boring move. It was the move that didn't satisfy my soul, right? But it was the right thing to do. And this taught me, I felt like this was a good analogy for Brexit, really. I really do. It's stuck in my brain. Because I think that's what it is for people who voted for Brexit. This is what their soul wanted. This was the interesting thing. This was, to them, this was the trip through the forest and the Irish, with the Irish Glen flowing behind them. And it was avoiding what was the logical, what the path that all the experts and everyone were telling them to do, which is just get in your car and drive. It's like a minute and a half up the road. But no, they wanted an adventure. They wanted something new. They wanted to try something different. And I guess that's what I would say to Remainers out there, rejoiners, is I think that's a way that you have to look at Brexit from their point of view, right? You have to look at it as they thought this was going to be exciting and a big adventure. And it's really hard when you set out on something that's a big, exciting adventure to admit to yourself that it hasn't gone to plan. Yeah? That it is, the path has got dodgy and you're just getting stung by nettles and thorns. And you just keep hitting stone walls and you're not finding the town that you wanted. You're not finding the place that you wanted. You're not getting there. Where you're going, the direction you're going isn't getting you to where you need to go. And in fact, the only way to get to where you want to go is to turn around, go back to the beginning of the journey and say, I didn't take the right path. Right? But I guess what I'm saying to Remainers is I think there's this tendency to want to rub this in the Brexiters' faces, right? And in one sense, I get it because, they haven't exactly been gracious about this, have they? I mean, I've certainly had a lot of abuse thrown my way over the years by Brexiters around how, cry harder and you blah, 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 and you can't accept, you can't accept democracy. And I don't even need to rehash it. You all know it. But I think if we want to come together again, I think if we want to rejoin the EU, we kind of need to accept that maybe it did look a little exciting to some people at the beginning. Maybe it did look like walking along an Irish glen as opposed to driving on a crappy road. Maybe that's the way they saw it. And I think we have to kind of be gracious in saying they, the ones who say, I think I got it wrong and head back to home base, I think we got to be gracious about it. I don't think this is a thing to gloat about. Because frankly, Remainers have a lot to be ashamed of. Some of the behavior of Remainers has been terrible. Not least of which was how badly the Remain campaign was run, which is sort of a big reason, it's one of the big reasons why we're here and why we voted leave. The Remain campaign was arrogant, silly, badly run. One of the reasons we're here. I think you kind of got to accept that. And I think Liberals were very obnoxious about the idea of that leaving was a stupid idea and anybody who wanted to leave the EU was stupid. They weren't stupid. They wanted something different. And they were told by, a whole host of very credible people, like, this is what's going to happen and don't worry about the downsides. Essentially, don't worry about hitting dead ends and getting stung by nettles. This is going to take you to the town, and it's going to take you to the town by a very scenic route, and it's going to be really lovely. And you're going to be glad that you got there. And it's going to be this soul-fulfilling experience, and it's going to change your life. So do it. And they've ended up, at a dead end. But that's not their fault, right? And in fact, it's kind of no one's fault, right? It was perfectly sensible in 2016 to think that maybe Brexit could work out. I genuinely don't think that was that silly an idea. Maybe we could have left. Maybe the EU does panic. Maybe the EU goes, oh, okay, well, we're going to offer you a deal, and essentially you're going to be in the single market, but you don't have to have freedom. You can get rid of all that stuff, and they just do this great deal, and EU sort of unity fractures immediately on fear of Brexit, and other people are threatening to leave, and this plays into into Britain's favor. And then, we get some great trade deal with the US, or that Anglosphere thing works out. I mean, I never thought any of that was very plausible, and in the end it hasn't turned out to be, because none of that's happened. But I don't think that was a wildly silly idea. In theory, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, I think the walk through the brambles and the nettles and the stone walls trying to get to Lismore really showed me, well, yeah, A is a metaphor for how Brexit's a dead end, but that's simplistic. The real metaphor is it's understandable to have wanted to go on the journey, and I think we have to recognize that when we're trying to get people to admit that they made a mistake, or get people to say, you know what, I voted leave, I gave it a chance, it really hasn't worked. I think, yeah, we should probably rejoin. And my thing about rejoin is, I think when we rejoin, I think we should just rejoin. I'm really not in on the incrementalism thing. This idea of, the Lib Dems now want to rejoin the customs union. I just think that's really silly. Why do we want to do that? Let's either be in or out. And if we're going to be out, I'd rather just be out, and we try every silly thing, and we try every silly idea that you can possibly do, and we keep trying to get a U.S. trade deal, and we keep all that stuff. Let's just keep doing that until everybody finally realizes that it wasn't a great idea, and we get to the point where we're like, let's rejoin. The customs union, the fight back you're going to get, and you're going to have people saying this disrespected the 2016 referendum result, which is stupid. I agree. That's a silly argument. But people will make it, and people will believe that, and for what, So we can kind of end up in the same basic place as Turkey is with the EU. I mean, what? That's just no. I'm waiting till we rejoin, or, and I'll say this with an open mind, a genuine open mind. Someone makes Brexit work. I don't think that's possible, but I'm still waiting here 10 years. Well, not quite 10 years. It's more like 9 and a bit, but almost a decade on, getting close to a decade on, in the point where saying it's a decade on isn't an unreasonable exaggeration any longer. Yeah, I'm still waiting. I could be convinced, sure. Yeah, not a problem. I don't know, if Farage becomes PM and he gets some great trade deal out of the US, and it's like amazing, and it's just incredible, and it's like no trade deal that anyone's ever got with the US ever in their lives, I could be convinced. My point is, I think that's insanely unlikely. But if the insanely unlikely happens, my mind is there to be changed. And until that point, I just still see being in the EU as the best bet for the United Kingdom. Because none of the stuff that was magically supposed to happen when we left has happened. And actually, a lot of the reason for that is, what the Brexiteers will say is, well, but the whole point of Brexit, it was going to allow us, i.e. the UK government, to make the most of it and do better things for the country. And my point was always, yeah, but we're really terribly governed. We're generally governed by not very good people. Look, the UK is a wonderful place. England is a wonderful country. I love it. I've lived here for almost 30 years, and it's amazing. But it's amazing because the people are great, and the country's beautiful, and the culture's amazing. And this, I could go on. There's so many amazing things about England. But one of the amazing things about England isn't that it's well run. It's really quite astonishingly poorly run. And generally always is. It's the reason that Thatcher and Blair are still talked about in such reverential terms, well, both reverential and I'll get to, derogatory terms, is because they were rare examples of very strong leaders who had a real idea of what they wanted to do and did it. And that's why we still talk about Thatcher and Blair. It's because that's so rare. It's so rare. Most of it, like, everybody's talking about how Starmer's the worst PM ever. He's not really. He's just a very average British Prime Minister. Just sort of floundering about. Not really knowing what the hell he's doing. And mainly screwing up. That's generally how the United Kingdom's run. Like, I'm sorry, that's the history of the country. With great culture. Amazing culture. Writing, films, music, theater, you name it. Incredible history. Science, incredible history. In the world of business, innovations, in banking, insurance, you name it. UK has an just an incredible history. It's an amazing country that does amazing things. It just doesn't do politics particularly well. We're just generally run by idiots. I'm really sorry to say that, but I'm saying that not from some outsider perspective, but from someone who's covered politics, generally speaking, or worked in politics for the last 15 years straight. I'm not saying every politician's an idiot in Britain. Lots of them are quite bright. Some of them are even brilliant, right? But the system really kind of tends to elevate idiots. It's very predicated on people who kiss the right asses, rise to the top. Who basically play the system well. It's really not designed for brilliant people who know how to solve problems. It just isn't. So that was my main problem with Brexit, and remains my main problem with Brexit, is, this is going to allow the British state to do all this great stuff. Well, yeah, but we're going to magically suddenly be brilliantly governed. And in fact, we're governed worse than ever, really. I mean, if you think about the run of prime ministers since Brexit, right? May, Johnson, Truss, Sunak, Starmer. I mean, they're all rounding out. I mean, it feels early on Starmer, so it feels a bit harsh on Starmer. But the way it's going, you're looking at those 5 PMs is like all being in the bottom 10 all-time British prime ministers. Really, they've all been profoundly bad, really. Again, with Starmer, I suppose he's got time to turn it around. So who knows? It's just not looking good, is it? Let's be brutally honest. I mean, unless you're some sort of stormtrooper, absolute Labour, partisan, you can't say it's looking good for Starmer at the moment. What's better about Starmer than Sunak? I mean, I can say, well, Starmer's never stood in front of a stupid sign saying something that he has no intention of doing. Okay, so fine. But Also, he didn't, give away the Chagos Islands and pay for it. I mean, anyway, that's moving on to another topic. So yeah, this is the conclusion, at least for now, of my videos on Ireland. Thank you, those of you who watched them all. They've done better than any of the other videos I've ever done, which then kind of leads me to wonder if everybody's going to go away when I start talking about something other than Ireland, because there's only so much I can say about Ireland. I love Ireland, though I do, and think it's a wonderful country, and had an amazing time there and can't wait to go back. And I'm happy to do videos every once in a while on Irish politics because I'm actually interested in it, but I can't run a channel on Irish politics. I mean, that just seems... I don't think that would be to anyone's benefit, particularly. I think, I would run out of things to say fairly sharpish. But anyway, thank you for those who watched. And please, I'd love it if you kept watching. I'll try and say things that are interesting to you, particularly an Irish audience or an Ireland adjacent audience, people who want Irish content. I hope you liked some of the other content I do. But we'll wait and see. Anyway, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. Thank you as always, for watching. If you've got this far, please like and subscribe. It just every little bit helps, and I'll see you on the next one, hopefully.